And then recovery as well, just in terms of mental rest as well. It's not just about sleep, or it's not just about physical inactivity, right? It's also about, are you switching off mentally as well when you are not in your sport? And again, it's a very neglected topic of resting. I think even in the Asian context, especially, maybe I can say that people are afraid to rest because what am I doing if I'm resting? I'm not achieving my goals. I'm not training hard enough. Am I lazy? There's so many emotions that can come up with resting.
Melting Pot, a global podcast series hosted by Payal, connects guests who have inspiring stories and reaches out to a multicultural audience over 52 countries. Guests are diverse, such as celebrities, entrepreneurs, travelers, and many more who've had a turning point in their lives and moved over to a holistic lifestyle. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, social media. Hi, everyone. Joining me today is Jeevita Pillai. She is a unique blend of sports psychology and she's a dance enthusiast. In fact, that is her profession. In fact, both are her professions. Jeevita's journey in dance began when she was just 4 years old. She was exploring a variety of styles, and we're going to hear all about it from Jeevita. However, I think it was her specialization in sports psychology that led to an innovative fusion of her professional expertise and her lifelong passion. She founded AfrowithJeevi and Dare platform. She has created spaces where dance becomes a tool for both physical and mental growth. So thank you so much for joining me today, Jeevita.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Okay, Jeevita, let's start with your background. I know I did mention in the introduction that you were all of 4 when you got interested in dance, but did that at the age of 4, it probably was not the most important part of your life, right? So
Yeah.
it become the most important part of your life, and how did that convert to passion and a career?
Dance was never a part of the plan of a career. Like, never in my wildest dreams would I have even thought of pursuing anything to do with dance as a career. And it was, it's hard to say that a specific time, because I just, maybe at 4 I wasn't conscious of it, but then I just always seen dance as a part of my life, right? There was never really a time that I remember dance not being a part of my life. And I think there's only, yeah, no, because even if I'm not the one teaching, I'm learning, or I'm going for a class in some way, one way or another. So I think even if I'm in my 40s or 50s or 60s, I'll probably still be dancing, just in a different way. So yeah, I think it was probably seeing other people. Again, I don't think I was conscious of it, but then I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. It was like seeing other people being involved in dance fitness, and I'm building a business out of it and things like that, that made me like, oh, okay, it's possible. But again, it wasn't like a, oh, okay, I want to build a business and make it a career. It was still like a, okay, I'm gonna make it a part of my life because it has already been a part of my life, right? So it just became a very natural progression.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting, interesting. So you have, through your dance journey, you have actually learned different kinds of dance styles, right? Like Chinese and hip hop and Indian. So how do you think that each of these, because they're dance is dance, but each style I feel is unique, right? So how has each style influenced your approach to dance? And what have your takeaways been from each of the different styles that you picked up? And then how did Afro dance become like the integral part of your life?
Again, something I would have never imagined. Funny how life works out. I like the main types of dance that come up for me when I was listening to your question was ballet, Indian dance, and I think in like the, maybe the, I'm still young when I was younger. I feel like with ballet and Indian dance, Bharatanatyam more specifically, I think they were so structured, but I think it was something that I needed at that time of my life. Being a young girl, I think it gave me discipline, it gave me structure, it gave me a very solid foundation, I feel, in life. I think because ballet and Bharatanatyam were opposite ends of the spectrum, because ballet you had to be light on your feet and Bharatanatyam you're like stamping
Yeah, yeah,
on the ground, right?
yeah.
And I remember one of my instructors, I don't know who, I think it was ballet, that told me that I had to choose between one, which I felt like was really sad and not very good of her to do, to ask me to choose at that point of time. But I think because I felt like both complemented each other. I think eventually I chose ballet, but then I didn't stick to it for a very long time. But yeah, I guess it both of that gave me the foundation, but I think it didn't give me the freedom that now when I look back, I think I yearned for. So that's when I started hip hop and reggaeton and things like that. There was a more freedom, I think, that came to it. So there was the structure that I needed, and then the freedom that I think I was yearning for, and got it from hip hop and the reggaeton and dance hall a bit. But and then it was like, okay, Zumba. So Zumba gave me that opening for it to become a career, right? Because didn't necessarily I didn't need to be uh, I needed to be licensed, but I didn't need to go through like intense training. So I think it was like, okay, this works for me in this part of my life where I'm pursuing an education in psychology, right? So I wanted to earn money in some way. This was like the perfect way to earn money because I liked what I did. I didn't have to spend a lot of time to do it, and I guess I had the personality for it as well. Again, at that time, I didn't really realize it, but it was like, oh, okay. I saw someone do it, and I was like, maybe I could do this. And then it became a thing. So I guess, yeah, structure, foundation, freedom. And then it was a different kind of freedom with Zumba, just in terms of financially, I could get something from it. And then with African dance, I feel like it's a whole other level of freedom. I think you can even just tell from my just a shift
Yeah.
when I talk about
It's
African dance.
yeah,
It's
it's
a whole
liberate.
other
It's
thing.
like liberation,
So
right? Yeah,
liberating, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And um yeah, there's just something about the moves, the music. I think there's a lot of science behind it as well. But yeah, I think that just gave me I still love all the other types of dances that I did, and I think it gave me a good foundation for everything to do African dance. But I think African dance is the one that spoke to me the most. And at this point in my life, maybe because African dance did come into my life a bit earlier, but I don't think I was ready for it. And I think as I grew as a person, as a dance instructor, then it came to a point where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for this. And I do feel a sense of responsibility, right? Because it is not my culture. And even though Zumba isn't my culture either, and all the different types of dances that I did wasn't my culture, I think, except for Indian dance, Bharatanatyam. But I think with African dance, there was a bit more of a responsibility to be mindful of. So I think I wasn't ready before, and then it came to a point where I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this step and let's see where it takes me. And then yeah, it literally took me to Africa and literally took me to my second home. So yeah.
yeah. Interesting. So tell me, because you are a sports psychologist, how do you think the principles of sports psychology actually can be brought into your dance fitness? What kind of parallels do you see there? Or how
Mm.
can you incorporate it, or how does it help when you bring it into the dance fitness classes that you do?
So I think it would be twofold. One is sports psychology, the tools, the mindset. A lot of it also helps me, I think, as just an entrepreneur, just as the business side of it. And then in the classes itself, in terms of interacting with my clients and things like that, I I think the main thing about my dance fitness classes, Afro dance specifically, was about creating that safe space. And
Mm.
as a sports psychologist, I know what that means, right? Because I have to create that safe space for my clients anyway. And of course, that looks very different in sports psychology and in dance, but it's as simple as the moment someone steps into the class and the way we welcome them, and even introducing the class to each other. Sometimes when you go to dance fitness classes, you barely know who you're dancing with,
Yeah,
right? No
yeah,
one actually knows who they're dancing with, and you leave the class not having interacted with anybody. And I feel like I'm proud to say that with my classes, I remember there was a point I was coming to my class, and then I think there were just people who were early, and when I walked in, I saw all of them in their different, not even, it was not that they were in cliques or anything, but everybody was just talking to each other and updating each other about their lives. And I was like, I just took a moment and I was like, yes.
Is there a commonality between the way you would handle an athlete who is a golfer versus someone who's a marathon runner versus a tennis player? Are there any different approaches, or it's pretty uniform across all sports?
I would say the challenges can be similar. Of course, I think I would answer that question in a way that maybe people always say, "Oh, psychologists, you never give a straight answer," but it really is a gray area, right? Because you can't say that one size fits all. There are definitely, of course, unique elements to each sport that you need to take into consideration. But what I also like to say to athletes is that you are the expert in your sport, right? At the end of the day, even if I have played the sport, like even with I used to play netball and I used to do a bit of marathons and things like that. But at the end of the day, your experience is your experience and my experience is mine, and I can't put that on you. So I would like to say that I see it as I'm bringing the sports psychology knowledge and tools, and you're bringing the sport specific knowledge and tools, and then we work together and we see what works for you, right? So I always say it as it's not me talking at you, it's a two-way thing. And but yeah, I think we still need to acknowledge certain elements of the sport. So for example, I used to work with sailing, and sailing is such a unique sport when you're out in the water, right? So there are definitely things that I probably would say differently to a sailor that I would say to a tennis player, just because of the environment, right? There's so many things that I would need to take into consideration for a sailor versus a tennis player. But I would still bring in elements of acceptance and commitment therapy and recovery and things like that. Yeah, to answer, it's still I need to acknowledge the uniqueness of the sport, and of course I can use the tools that can be used for across the board to apply it and adapt it to the athlete, to the athlete and the sport. It's also not just the sport specific details, right? It's the person specific details, right, at the end of the day as well. So what may work for one sailor may not work for another sailor. So
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Women athletes versus male athletes. Is there a different approach in terms of the kind of guidance and support that you would provide? Is there again, because the psychology could be different, women athletes and male athletes may have a different approach to the way they look at things. So is it something that you work on closely? Is there something that you've observed? Anything that you want to share? Now, how do they approach competition and training? Like, how do the men versus the women? Is there the same kind of approach, or is there a different approach? And then, therefore, how would you approach the way you work with them?
Yeah. I think it comes back to the same thing about each individual is unique. I don't think I can really generalize that, or
it's not gender specific.
It wouldn't say. I think, of course, I would definitely take into consideration things like menstrual cycles and things like that for the females.
Yeah.
And I would be more aware of certain things that could happen in a environment, right? Like, or just male, or if a female is in a male dominated sport, for example. So I think those things I do need to take into consideration. Like I was doing a research on transition from junior to senior levels, and I interviewed the female footballers and a female athlete who was in water polo. So their challenges as a female athlete in a male dominated sport, that was very unique, right? The challenges that they faced, the path that they had to create for other female athletes. So again, I think those are the things that I do need to acknowledge and take into consideration, that for them, their challenges would be very different from say, a netball player where it's a female dominated sport. So it's things like this that I would have to take into consideration.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense because I think you have to be mindful. And then your approach is because there are some sports, like you've mentioned, that are completely male dominated,
Yeah.
but women do have the talent and they do have the access and they should be given an opportunity to be able to pursue it if they're good in it. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so you've created two platforms. One is your Afro with Jeevi, is that what it's called? Yeah. The other one is Dare. Yeah. So what is the Dare platform?
So the DARE platform, so DARE in itself is actually an acronym for, or a metaphor for,
Dance, of course, dance has to come.
no, it's not. It's
Okay.
actually tools that athletes can use, and it's derived from acceptance and commitment therapy. So D stands for diffusion, A stands for acceptance, R stands for realistic goals, and E stands for embracing values. So a big part of acceptance and commitment therapy is values as well. What kind of athlete do you want to be? Competitions and your goals and things like that. Like we dive deeper into that, and then it's nice right there. So you daring to pursue high performance or the goals that you have. So the dare platform is basically, we focus on three pillars of recover, connect, recover, and act. The reason why I wanted to, of course it's not limited to these three pillars, but I wanted to emphasize these three pillars because I guess reflecting on my experiences as a sports psychologist working with athletes over the years, I there's a few themes that kept coming up for me, and one was that it can be a lonely journey being an athlete, even in a team sport. It can be a lonely journey, and there's often stigmas with asking for help. Or I think things have definitely become better over the
Yeah,
years in
yeah.
terms of the stigma, but then there's still that stigma. So in gaining professional help or just asking for help from your own social support, right? And how important that social support is in life, basically. So I wanted that to be a big part of the DARE platform. And then recovery as well, just in terms of mental rest as well. It's not just about sleep, or it's not just about physical inactivity, right? It's also about, are you switching off mentally as well when you are not in your sport? And again, it's a very neglected topic of resting. I think even in the Asian context, especially, maybe I can say that people are afraid to rest because what am I doing if I'm resting? I'm not achieving my goals. I'm not training hard enough. Am I lazy? There's so many emotions that can come up with resting, right? And I wanted to normalize rest and recovery. So that was also why it was a big part of the DARE platform. And basically, yeah, I want to equip athletes and also dancers who are pursuing high performance with these tools to, and also not only for focusing on performance or medals, it's also about their well-being, right? Yeah, so basically the DARE platform is equipping athletes and dancers with the tools for their well-being and their performance. And my vision for it, or my goal for it, is also to create a community of athletes and dancers so that they're supporting each other even if they're not in the same sport or same dance.
How did you actually think of moving to Kenya? What was the one catalyst that kind of propelled you in that direction? And why specifically Kenya? Why not any other African country? And then what is it that you really want to do living there?
I would say my first catalyst was dance that got me to Africa generally, because so I yeah, I think I was teaching African dance for a bit, and it just felt was the, I wouldn't say the right thing to do, but it just made sense to, okay, let's go. Let's actually go and immerse myself in the culture and go to the. But when my first trip to Africa was really traveling across different countries, so I did 10 countries across Southern and Eastern Africa, started in Cape Town, South Africa, and then ended in Nairobi in Kenya. That was like a 3 month trip, and I also just wanted a break. It was after COVID, and I think any mental health practitioner can tell you that it was tough times during COVID. So I did need a break. So my first trip was definitely like, okay, let's immerse myself in the culture, but let's also take a break and let's travel. And then when I ended my trip, I was like, I did end my trip in Nairobi, and I spent a week in Nairobi without the tour. That's when I started going for like dance classes and things like that. And was you're not really like a tourist anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, but then it
immerse
was less.
yourself. Yeah,
I was
yeah,
less of a tourist when I was just on my own, and I was just more grounded in what Nairobi was like, and I loved it. Again, at that point of time, I don't know what it was specifically, but it was just like that vibe, the energy. And then I was like, but maybe I need to. I do remember that there was a certain point in my travels that I was like, Africa feels like home. And it was not a specific country at that time, but I remember the moment very vividly in my mind that I was sitting in the vehicle called the Lando. It was like a bus
yeah.
like thing. And I remember just staring out the window and I was just like, Africa feels like home. I think this is where I want to move. But then I just let the thought go. Because I think I always knew that I wanted to live in another country just for the experience of it. But I didn't know where. I think it was more of like maybe Australia, maybe somewhere in Europe. But those were like very logical. It was a very logical perception or decision. But Africa, it felt more of a heart. It was like, I feel it here. I don't feel it here. And then, and then when I came back to Singapore, I went about with my dance business, but then there was still something in me was just like, I need to go back. I can't make a decision just like that, right, to just go. So I was like, okay, let me go back, and this time really go with the lens of, hey, could I live here? So I went back and I already started making connections there. Like I knew people. So when I went back, it just became a bit easier to like, I had a place to stay and I had connections there. People took me around, and I was just exploring Nairobi as a potential country to live in. And then and then I think I was just tired of going back and forth. And then I was just like, you know what? Let's just book a one-way ticket. And of course, with that decision comes a lot of other decisions to make, because what about the business? What about this? What about that? Finances? Like there were a lot of what ifs, but then I was also at the point where if I don't do this, I think I'm just gonna regret it, because I'll always be asking what if. And I don't like to live like that. So I've never lived like that, and I don't want to start now. And I'm still young, and I didn't have, it's not even about how old you are. I just think it was like didn't have that many responsibilities that, I would be really leaving and things like that. So I was like, I'm just going to go, I'm going to give it a shot. And if anything, I'll just come back. And then I think, to answer your question about why Kenya specifically, again, I guess my logical answer would be that I already knew people there. It made things a lot easier. People were generally very welcoming, all around. I felt very welcomed, and of course there was the dance part of it where I was like, oh, this is the best place to just maybe there of course there's also West Africa, Nigeria and Ghana, but I was like, I'm here and I'm learning so much. And I'm also learning about East African dance, which is also not very well known, right? Or like the music and things like that. I think West Africa is still a bit more well known than East Africa. So it was like, I'm here, I'm in the heart of it, I'm learning all of this, and it would be so great to bring this back to Singapore as well. I knew I was always going to be coming back to Singapore anyway, and my business was still here, or is still here. So it was just like letting the universe in a way just help me shift things. So that's when then I got instructors on board, and then I got instructors on board also with the intention of them getting properly trained in Kenya, in Africa, because I wanted to be the bridge at the end of the day. So it was just like everything kind of just made sense on a logical level and also on a heart and soul level. Yeah, I guess I hope I answered your question.
Totally. I think what comes through is the passion, and I completely understand when you say that sometimes you can't explain it, but I totally get that, because I'm in that situation as well. And I feel like if it's your happy place, if you feel a connection, if you feel, you should just do it. Because like you said, there should be no regret that, oh my God, 10 years down the track, you're like, I should have done it. If you don't experience it, then you will never know. And sometimes it doesn't always turn out right, but at least you've experienced it. And somehow the fact that you brought in African dance into your life, the fact that it was probably already indicating and leading you in that direction. And then eventually you just found what you felt was completely your essence of being in Africa and absorbing the culture, absorbing the dance, making connections, just being a part. And I completely agree that it's so important to immerse yourself into a different culture. And only then can you really feel a part of it. If you go and say, oh, I lived in X country, and then you're in a little bubble, then you're not really not really living there. You're not really understanding. You're not the essence of the culture, the people. It could be whatever it is, different aspects of it. So yeah, no, completely. I'm so with you on this. And
thank you. Because it's not easy to explain, to be honest. I have had this question asked a lot of times, and also I think people sometimes add the layer of, you come from Singapore, like why would you leave? Everything is, it's safe here, efficient, structured. It ticks all the boxes, right? Like why would you ever leave? But I think it's beyond that. And I just think it's beyond that. And it's, again, like you said, it's difficult to explain and not many people get it. But I think I also came to a point where I was like, it's not about people getting it either. Like it's my life.
It's about you. You have to own it, you have to live it, you have to love it. And I think that's the most important thing. And every single minute of it is a learning, a new learning. So it's only growing you as an individual.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm completely on the same page as you.
Thank you. It helps to meet people who are like, who get it, and you don't feel like you need to explain yourself, or it's just you get it, so it's nice.
Closing the conversation, what are some, clearly people who are who will be listening in or watching this episode would have clearly picked up the thread of what it means to be an independent person, what it means to have the courage and have the ability to go ahead and do what you want to do. And of course, being an athlete, and how important sports psychology, the kind of role that the mental well-being of an athlete plays as a sports psychologist. So all of that clearly is what, I'm just summing it all up, is what comes through in this conversation. But I would still like you to add just your last thoughts on whatever it is that you think is important to share with people for them to get some kind of an inspiration. All of this conversation is an inspiration, but just a couple of points that you would like to end the conversation with.
This feels like pressure, but I kind of want the golden nugget. I feel like it's like how I ended the conversation for the Women's Forum about nudges. I feel like that's been a big theme in my life, just in terms of I know I'm an independent person, but I think I'm so fortunate and grateful to be able to say that I also have a tribe of women who are also, and men who are also, I have a tribe basically, not just of women, but both of women and men who, who sometimes may not get it of the life that I live. But I think it's so important to have these nudge queens and kings in my life as well, including my parents, because I think sometimes I don't give them enough credit for, they could prevent me from doing a lot of things. So I think like one is just the nudge queens and kings in my life that I really want to thank, because I think sometimes it can be very lonely to want to follow your heart, but then also it's so scary and you feel like you're being pulled in all kinds of directions, and the fear can get in, and sometimes you don't really have someone else who might have done the same thing, and you're like, what am I doing? There's just all of that. So sometimes it's good to have that tribe to ground you, including my parents. So that's one. It's all related to, so the nudge queen and kings, but also listening to your own nudges, that soft voice. And I said soft, right? Because the loud ones are the ones that like, don't do it. What are you doing? You're
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
But it's the soft ones that you need to listen to. That at first I didn't get it when people said that what you're doing is inspiring and what you're doing is brave. Like I didn't internalize it. I didn't understand it. But then it was like, yeah, actually, when I look back, I'm going to own it. Yes, I am brave. And I did do something that was, I do acknowledge that also it comes with a lot of privilege. But then at the same time, I am going to acknowledge that it was brave, because a lot of times I could have just not taken that first step and not make that big shift in my life or shifts in my life. So I would say surround yourselves with the nudge queens and kings who are gonna hold you accountable, ground you, and support you, even if they don't get it. Listen to your own, and yeah, to listen to your own nudges, that soft voice that may sometimes be drowned by the loud ones, but she matters more.
Yeah.
And also to nudge other people. I think just by living your own life and following your own nudges, I think you're also nudging other people.
Setting an
Yeah.
example. Yeah, yeah. That if she can do it, then so can I.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And
No.
we're all connected, right? Like we're all
Yeah.
actually in this together. We're all actually helping each other in a lot of ways. And my friend is also looking to move to another country, and she just told me like 2 days ago, thank you for doing what you're doing, because you making me, like, you holding me accountable to keep going, even though it's scary and you don't know what, there's a lot of uncertainty. But like that made me realize, oh yeah, like we are in this together and it matters what we, or the life that we're living. So yeah, three nudges.
Trina.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeevita. I really enjoyed listening to you, and I'm sure a lot of people will be encouraged by your life story. And there's a lot more ahead for you, and I'm sure it's going to be all good. And good luck with being able to spend more time in Nairobi and being able to, it's your calling, clearly, and being able to follow your heart and do all the wonderful things that you have been doing, and I'm sure you'll continue to do. So thank you for being a part of Melting Pot. For more weekly conversations, do listen to Melting Pot on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on YouTube and on Instagram at Podcast Melting Pot. So until the next episode, this is Payal signing off.